Good morning, friends and family, and welcome to this Thursday, September 5th edition of our Walking with Jesus devotional. Today we are on pages 34 and 35 in our reader, and we are looking at the teaching of Jesus when he talks about fasting. This is found in three Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and so I'm going to hop right in, starting with Matthew 9:14 through 17. One day, the disciples of John the Baptist came to Jesus and asked him, "Why don't your disciples fast like we do and the Pharisees do?" Jesus replied, "Do wedding guests mourn while celebrating with the groom? Of course not. But someday the groom will be taken away from them, and then they will fast. Besides, who would patch old clothing with new cloth? For the new patch would shrink and rip away from the old cloth, leaving an even bigger tear than before. And no one puts new wine into old wineskins, for the old skins would burst from pressure, spilling the wine and ruining the skins. New wine is stored in new wineskins, so that both are preserved." And then we have from Mark 2:18 through 22. Once, when John's disciples and the Pharisees were fasting, some people came to Jesus and asked, "Why don't your disciples fast like John's disciples and the Pharisees do?" Jesus replied, "Do wedding guests fast while celebrating with the groom? Of course not. They can't fast with the groom while the groom is with them, but someday the groom will be taken away from them, and then they will fast. Besides, who would patch old clothing with new cloth? For the new patch would shrink and rip away from the old cloth, leaving an even bigger tear than before. And no one puts new wine into old wineskins, for the new wine would burst the wineskins, and the wine and the skins would both be lost. New wine calls for new wineskins." And finally, from Luke's Gospel, the 5th chapter, 33 through 39. One day some people said to Jesus, "John the Baptist's disciples fast and pray regularly, and so do the disciples of the Pharisees. Why are your disciples always eating and drinking?" Jesus responded, "Do wedding guests fast while celebrating with the groom? Of course not. Someday the groom will be taken away from them, and then they will fast." Then Jesus gave them this illustration. No one tears a piece of cloth from a new garment and uses it to patch an old garment, for then the new garment would be ruined, and the new patch wouldn't even make the match the old garment. And no one puts new wine into old wineskins, for the new wine would burst the wineskins, spilling the wine and ruining the skins. New wine must be stored in new wineskins. But no one who drinks the old wine seems to want the new wine. The old is just fine, they say. So two different thoughts. One is a conversation about fasting. The reality is this is probably one of the spiritual practices that I hear people participate in the least. Oh yes, I know, during Lent we usually encourage some kind of a fast, and many people do, but it's usually not necessarily a fast from food, all food, for an entire day or longer. It's not necessarily an intentional weakening of the self in order to seek God. And that's exactly what John's disciples were doing, and that's what the Pharisees' disciples were doing. They were fasting from all food for an entire day or longer, usually longer, in order to seek after God. Now, Jesus' point to them is that God was right with them, and so there was no need for his disciples to be fasting. In truth, he was saying that John's disciples didn't need to fast, and the Pharisees' disciples didn't need to fast. Jesus was there. All they had to do was turn to him. But we don't have Jesus right here with us. Yes, we do have the Holy Spirit living inside of us, breathing inside of us, moving inside of us. But Jesus isn't walking alongside us. So fasting should be a part of our regular lives. I have to admit that it's not something that I do very well, and yet it keeps coming up. And so it's something that I'm looking at putting into my life as a regular rhythm. The other thing is this discussion about new patch, old cloth, new wine, old wineskins. You know, in the business world, they say if you keep doing the same thing, you're going to get the same results. Or the definition of insanity is to keep doing the same thing over and over and over again, believing you're going to get different results. Those are both saying the same thing as this parable. The truth is that oftentimes we don't have the spiritual life we want because we're doing the old things that didn't work. I think one of the things it would behoove us to do is to occasionally sit down, look at our spiritual practices, look at our life, look at our rhythms, and say, is this getting me what I want? Am I drawing closer to God through these practices or not? And if not, maybe it's time to look at something different. Not to do nothing, but to do something different. A new way of approaching things. A new wine with a new wine skin. A new cloth. And so I hope and pray that as we go throughout this journey of walking with Jesus, you're going to find some new things that maybe God is inviting you to participate in. And along the way, I pray and I hope that you will find yourself encountering God in new and powerful ways. Maybe fasting is one of those things that you need to add into your life. And maybe, just maybe, not only will you experience Jesus along the way, but the fullness of the Spirit as well. I hope that you have a blessed Thursday, and I'll see you later. Blessings.